Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Scott.
I'm Shatay, and we're the Hazes.
Welcome to the Love Haze podcast, where we believe that healing and wholeness are not destinations.
That's right. We believe they're a journey, and here on the Love Haze, we talk about how to navigate through it.
Is that right? We talk a lot about navigating relationships here, healing past traumas, setting appropriate boundaries, telling people what is needed to be in relationship with us. But family, shawty,
Ciao.
what can we say?
Yeah.
A lot, shawty. We can say a lot, and we about to. We about to get right into this family thing. Welcome back to our Black Love Journey. Let's get into it.
Turn up.
How do we get to this topic of family?
I think sometimes we have, not sometimes, we do have a list of things that we will be like, oh, this will be something really cool to unpack. Or we're watching something on TV and we'll be like, ooh, they said something or did something that I really want to unpack. And then sometimes, a good number of times, some of my favorite times are when things are just happening organically in our lives. And I really, for me, felt like this was something that I wanted to process with you, have an actual discussion with you. So there are a couple of things that go into this. Friends or people that we know or people that we've even seen in the media have divorced their families, right? They have let go of the family relationship because it has been so toxic and they are healing, right? I even saw this really funny meme that I should probably share, put on our stories or something, where this dude, he's eating a plate and it's in the caption at the top, the words are like, when you're the only person in your family that's been to therapy. And he's like over there just eating, and then you hear like yelling and screaming and throwing things in the background.
Yeah.
So I think there's some of that happening. There is like our fertility journey is happening. It's really caused us to have to talk about like what does family mean to us. Then I think about our nuclear families, and this is not the first time it's come up for me. It's been seeded to me in different ways throughout my life. But, you know, what does it mean to maybe not have been raised by both biological parents? So like, let's say in my example, my biological father, I was not raised by him, but my dad, who I call my dad, who raised me, my parents have been married since I was like 2, and I am his. And then to also have people who were probably raised in the household with both of their biological parents, and maybe there not be that much of, there still be some friction and bumping heads. And so it really does bring up this question, like, what does family mean then? You know, you can have people that are part of your family that might not necessarily be blood, but they've been there all the time. You could have people that are blood that y'all just don't gel. Right. Y'all are just very different. And so what is it? And I think I just want to spend some time there to really, really, maybe something will come up so I can really understand how I feel. And I'd love to hear how you feel about it too. But can we start with like, what does family even mean to you?
I don't know that I have words for what family means to me. Family is more than just blood family. I acknowledge that, you know, my family of origin, the bloodline that I came from is very important to me. They set the foundation for most of the things that I believe and some of the things that I don't believe anymore. My mother, my father, my siblings, the relationships that I have with aunts and uncles, they were pivotal in my upbringing. They mean the world to me. And family is just very important to me. And at this stage of my life, it also encompasses the family that I choose.
Yeah.
Friends who have become family, relationships throughout high school and college that have become more like family. People who are in this city that we live in or outside of the city that we live in who are invested in our health and in all aspects of our whole health moving forward, and actively work to further that relationship to make sure that we are doing the things as community to move forward with being healthy and being in
Mhm.
relationship and
Mhm.
showing up for each other. That is also family to me.
Mm.
So it is expansive, but it's also exclusive for me too, because not everybody is family.
I hear you when you say that, and then one of the first things you said is my bloodline is really important to you. Why do you think bloodline is so important to so many people? Because I also have friends who are going through fertility journeys, and when you're up against the your options, right? We are not necessarily spring chickens, and that's not defeatist or negative
Right.
talk. Like, biologically speaking, we are of an age where it is just harder
Hmm.
to conceive naturally. And so, even talking with friends of mine who are having difficulties of their own, and when adoption comes up, for some people, not for everyone, it's kind of like, well, my bloodline, maybe I'm the last one of my bloodline. I had a friend say that to me. And so, grappling with the idea of like you could adopt or have a donor part component in some
Hmm.
way. Why is bloodline so important?
So I can only
If I
speak
can
for
add
me.
one
Right.
thing, especially if so many of our family relationships have like trauma wrapped up in them. Do you know
Mhm.
what I mean? Like, why is bloodline so important?
For me, I think it's one of those things that my dad imparted to me that really stuck with me. Just this understanding that I am the last male Hayes in my bloodline, and like him imparting that to me and saying that almost it's your responsibility to move the bloodline forward.
Mm,
Um, I've tried several times to talk myself out of that. It is just one of those things that has stayed with me, and I think you know for a for a man, uh, and for me, bloodline has always been something that you want to move forward. You want to things that I heard when I was a child that stuck with me, like my uncle Marrell, like telling me to straighten up my belt when we're at church. Like Hayes men don't do that. Like
mm,
Hayes men operate this way. This is the way that you show up as a Hayes man, right? And knowing that there's a possibility that the last Hayes man could end with me is very sobering,
mm,
and it just gives you like this sense of responsibility, a sense of urgency that you're responsible for the bloodline moving forward. Like, does the Hayes name die with me if I don't have male children to carry on my name? And sometimes that's something so heavy to carry and so stressful to carry, but that is why it's my why for it being important. I can't speak for anybody else.
So that one is a lot of pressure. My
Hmm.
gosh, that's a lot of pressure. And two, the
Hmm.
Hayes name would not die with you because any children that we have would still have the Hayes name.
Bloodline.
But the name, you said name. And then also the other thing that you mentioned were like Hayes men do this, Hayes men do that. So that's taught. You could teach anyone to be
Okay.
how a Hayes man is, but
Hmm.
those are just some of the things. I'm not challenging what you said.
Hmm.
I'm just responding to a couple of those
Hmm.
thoughts. To me, family is belonging. It's the place where you belong, as if I could say it in the simplest terms. I've always had this thing, I don't know where it comes from. My therapist points out my abandonment issues often, and I honestly don't know where the abandonment issues came from either.
Hmm.
Maybe I'll discover it at some point in my therapeutic journey, but I've always, since I was a little girl, wanted all the family together. I want us to eat together. I want us
Yes.
to be around together because it was like this place where I belonged. And I even learned young as a kid, being out in spaces, I learned what it felt like to not belong, for someone to make a difference
Yeah.
in me in the family. You talk different, you act different, you are not biologically this person, so you're different.
Hmm.
So outside of my family of origin, my nuclear family, I knew what that felt like. And with that group of people, there was such belonging. Like, however I was, I belonged there. So to me, family just means like wherever, I guess, you belong. And I know it's deeper than that. There's more to it, but that's the only thing I can think of, like
Yeah.
where we belong.
I think that's something that we developed over the course of time to write like our own definition of what family means to us individually. I think it's okay, and I think for me, a part of my healing journey has been to figure out like what family really and truly means to
Yeah.
me. Like when I was growing up, my family was like my people, my cousins,
Mhm.
playing outside with them, being
Mhm.
at my grandmother's house, you know, my siblings, my parents. That was the only real definition I had of family. And of course, everybody grew up with like play cousins, friends that you had around that were always close to your family. And they're like, we ain't real cousins, but we play cousins. Like,
Mhm.
we call each other cuz, that kind of thing. As I've grown, though, and just experience and being in a position to where I couldn't talk to family about certain things because of past traumas, because of hurt places, because of stuck places, I developed family on a different level. Friends who were the people who were there for me when I couldn't talk, a
Mhm.
pastor who was family to me when I couldn't talk to my father about things because of his own belief system and stuck places. Family just evolved into something very different for me.
Mhm.
And understanding that it is about people who are there for you and know how to show up for you and, really create safe spaces to be able to walk you through life's journeys.
I think we say that, and I don't disagree with that idea.
Hmm.
Then why does it feel so different when it comes to trying to define what family means to you or us in terms of the family we're trying to build? So on the one hand, we can say like family is the people who have been there for you and have surrounded you and supported you, but then it just hits different when you talk about building family.
Hmm.
What do you think that is?
Um, I think it is the very core of what juxtaposition feels like, and the intersection of like your values and what you want things to be, right?
Mhm.
Of who I really am and who my ideal self is,
Mhm.
right? It is the both and, if will, of life. You know, like I want family of origin, I want bloodline, I want all of those things, and I want to be able to take that bloodline and impart to them the sense of belonging that they can have and be family and do with anybody for anybody and not feel like it is limited, you know? And so I have my belief system that I grew up in that is constantly at war with like who I want to be and
Mm.
how open I want to be. And I am trying to find a happy medium so
Mhm.
those things can find a way to coexist.
Mhm.
And that's really the long and short of that answer. I don't know.
Mhm.
I don't know why it feels the way that it feels and why I can't make that make sense. But I know that I want my bloodline and I want my bloodline to be more open than the bloodline that I came from. I
Mhm.
want my bloodline to be better.
Yeah. We go back to even fertility. I've done a little bit of research about what people have done to create their families. If you think
Hmm.
about same sex families,
Hmm.
heterosexual families who haven't been able to conceive, there's so many different approaches to people being able to become parents and to build their families in some ways. If I could just list some of them, it's, you know, adoption,
Hmm.
fostering, it
Hmm.
is sperm donors, it is egg
Hmm.
donors, and sometimes those are people you don't know, and sometimes it's a loved one who
Hmm.
like donates something for you and then they become a part of your family too, and the,
Sure.
the people tell their kids like they helped us get you here and like we're this one big family. And so it's almost like Modern Family, the TV show,
Hmm. Yeah.
where it's all of these versions of connection or attachments coming together to create one larger family. And I'm still just sitting with that and what it means for me and how I feel about it. Because I guess one of the things that I'm coming up against is I just never thought, you know what I mean? I just assumed is probably a better word that
Hmm.
when it was time for me to have kids, I'd have a kid that just came from my body and my
Hmm.
husband's body, and that's it. And growing up, there wasn't a lot of conversation about any other option of that.
Absolutely.
And so
Yeah.
now we're met with all of these other options that feel so foreign, feel so outside of anything we were ever taught about, exposed to. And so now I'm sitting here like, what do I think about all of them? And I honestly, to your point, I don't have an answer
I don't have
for
an answer right now.
any
Yeah.
of it. It just feels like, huh, is that what it's supposed to be? I'm running against that. Like, is that what it's supposed? I'm supposing and shoulding? You know?
Mhm. Um, for me, it it is that our prayers have been that we are the
Proud
proud
birth
birth
parents
parents
of
of happy,
happy,
healthy,
healthy, whole,
whole, beautiful
beautiful
brown
brown babies.
babies,
Yes.
right? And being on this fertility journey and, having to grapple with like, what if we aren't?
Mm,
Are we would still be the proud parents of beautiful brown, healthy, whole babies, right? Um, and I've given pushback to anybody who's been like, "Why don't y'all foster? Why don't y'all
no, we don't
adopt?" And
want to
it's
do
been like,
that.
"That's not our prayer," you know. And at this point in the journey, with us being the big ages that we are, we're having to think about non-traditional
Hmm.
things that we haven't thought about, um, and how that may look. And that is a difficult path to be on when you think about family.
It is. But one of the things I'm finding also really surprising is how many people have done it and just haven't said anything about it.
Right.
And
Hmm.
it would be, hence why we have the Love Haze podcast. It would be so much more beneficial when people are going through things to know that other people have gone through them and what their experience has been. When we first started on, or early on, I'll say, in our fertility journey, I was having conversations with people who had done IVF, and I was surprised to learn who had had an egg donor, and
Hmm.
because they never said anything,
Yeah,
and
people don't talk about it.
it's their
Hmm.
prerogative. You don't have to
Hmm.
tell people your business, and them saying, "Well, I don't feel any different about my child. It is
Yeah.
my child." And I've had a friend say to me before, like, they have children from her body and her husband's body, and she's like, "I don't even think about it that way." She's like, "It's just love." That's what I keep hearing.
Hmm.
It's just love, and so if they had come to me any other way, she was like, it is just love. And so I hear that. I really do, and I deeply appreciate it. And there's still something that's just kind of like, but why? But why? You know?
Hmm. I think that we are all tasked, to do our own portion of the work around like our why, and even how that changes like the definition of family for us as well. And how we're almost tasked to do that
Mm,
part of the work, to expand the definition of, to have the conversations that folks aren't having. I think we have been doing that around relationship. Um, One of the things I always talk about, being upset about when I was going through life transition of transitioning out of my first marriage, where there were so many people who were having like these issues that weren't having a conversation,
hmm.
and to be going through that thing and to figure out that there are other people who've gone through that same journey and just made their own choices but never talked about it. And I haven't even decided if we will be the people to talk about,
Hmm.
what our journey ends up looking like, or
Hmm.
how our babies get here, or any of that.
Hmm.
But I know that there is still work for me to do around like my understanding of what family is, detaching from some of the bloodline stuff,
Mm.
because of that. Some of that leans into like me defining my own manhood and
Yeah.
stuff that I have been trying to free myself from in other areas of my life. And you cannot get free from a portion of stuff that is toxic and not get free from all of it.
Yeah.
And that is the thing that I think I'm actively grappling with now. Like, I want to keep this toxic part of it because I bloodline, bloodline, bloodline. That's the thing. One of the things
Mm.
that my dad gave me that it's probably been unhealthy for me in my life, that I've still been trying to hold on to. Like, I still want to honor my father's legacy in that way, to have the Hayes name carried on. And that is just something that I haven't been able to release. Active conversations that I'm having in therapy about what that looks like if I'm not able to do that. And it is hurtful. It is It makes me feel at times less than a man. It is the work of having to release myself from this expectation and being able to redefine what family looks like. And not to say that it won't ever happen, but at this point, I've said that if, God is going to do that for our family, then he will do it,
Yeah.
and me not taking the time to own that as failure, failure or a success or a defining moment of my manhood or my status in God's eyes or as a um, indicator of me being good enough in any sense of the word. And that is active work that I have to do.
I have some questions if you're comfortable answering, or just thoughts. I think that as I'm listening to you say, like, it came your dad saying, you know, putting this pressure on you about the Hayes bloodline, it almost makes me feel it's really unfair because he's like asking you to do something. It's almost like he's asking you to right his wrong or do something he wasn't able to do because he
Mhm,
has other sons allegedly, right?
mhm,
So technically his bloodline is still going on, it's just not the name. And so to
mhm,
then give it to you to be like, hey, you be the one
mhm.
to make sure that our sons have our names and it
It
keeps
is.
going, it's really, really unfair. And it feels like almost like he gave you his stuff. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah, it absolutely is unfair. And that's the thing about our traumas, right? And our healing and the part of the work that we are responsible to. We all have to make choices about what stuff we will buy into. So my dad also left me with this responsibility of taking care of my mother and taking care
Mhm.
of my sisters, and based on what his definition of that was.
Mhm.
And what I had to do was release myself from his definition of what taking care of them looks like.
Mhm.
And I've done some really hard work and make some active choices behind like letting them folk live their life like they want to live it
Mhm.
and shifting what his view of taking care of them looks like. Like I will always be there for my sisters. I will always be there for my mother, but I will always like love them in a way that allows them to be authentically who they are
Yeah.
and not based on what my dad's value system was. And in his eyes, taking care of them looked much different.
Yeah.
Taking care of them sometimes looked like doing it for or admonishing them or doing this other thing, showing up the way that he would have shown up. And that is not my job. And the part of the work that I have to do is releasing myself also from his definition of what bloodline looks like
Exactly.
and the tie to
Exactly.
carry on the name looks like. It is just harder for me to let that part go.
Yeah, and I'm glad we're even talking about it. I totally understand it being harder to let it go. I'm also wondering, for you, it feels like it's a family expectation that's been placed on you, like from
Hmm.
a family
Sure.
member. For me, it's kind of grappling with, is it societal? Is it religious? I'm not really quite sure. I haven't figured it out. But I'm wondering, like, what would I believe if I didn't have these societal external expectations? What would you believe if your dad had not ever said that to you? So if you didn't have this pressure, what's underneath that and what would we have just organically come to believe on our own? I don't know if there's a way to even answer that question, but that's what I'm trying to find out. Like I'm trying to get quiet enough, still enough to really truly let what I feel come to the surface, and it just hasn't yet, I think. And maybe the other thing I was thinking is maybe it won't come to the surface first.
Hmm.
Maybe you have to just take steps, and as you move towards a path, then it'll come up or something. Yeah,
All I can say is that is layers to this shit, right?
complicated.
So there is like my dad's stuff, there is the societal stuff, and the societal stuff meaning like being a cisgendered man who is Christian,
Mhm.
is black, who is wanting to have a family, wanting to be a black man working who is caring for my family and raising children and all these
Mhm.
other things that society says that doesn't really exist. Like black men don't take care of their kids, right?
Yeah.
But here I am, a black man working who is a social worker who is healing communities, who takes care of my wife, is faithful to my wife, honors my children, raises my children, all these other things. And then, like, I'm at the point where I have the marriage, I take care of my wife, I'm faithful in all these things, I'm honoring my Christian journey. I feel like I've done everything right.
Mm.
So, why haven't the kids come yet if I've done everything right? Right. And getting free um, from those expectations of my father, from those societal expectations,
Mhm.
from those um, expectations that I've given myself that define my humanity, and like I'm less than somehow if this part doesn't fall into place.
Yeah.
And again, active work that has to be done, uncomfortable work that has to be done, things that don't feel good, right? Because it is like this active fight against my not enoughness.
Yeah, I was gonna say that. It when things don't go our way, it's like we assign some meaning of ourselves
Hmm.
as a result,
Hmm.
you know? And I was trying to usher us into the haze. It feels like all of that.
It's
All of
all, yeah,
it.
it's all of it.
The whole situation is a haze.
Hmm.
Yeah. How are we navigating it?
I, I think we just keep showing up for ourselves.
Mm.
Um, every day I get up, I am continuing to show up for myself, right? And I was telling you last night, one of the things that you said to me this week really stuck with me. Because being on fertility meds for all of this time is just like I'm like lost all of this weight, being on fertility meds, being on one med, and then we added another med, and then another med, just like pumping, you know, testosterone, all the growth hormone into your body, like hungry, eating, working out, and then like seeing my body change. And I was willing to like gain the weight and continue to work out and do all those things if there was gonna be a baby on the back end of it.
Mhm.
And then coming to the end of like the medication part of our fertility journey and deciding that we're no longer gonna do medication and having all of this weight, right? Ain't got no baby to show for it.
Mm.
It is difficult. And one of the things that you said to me was like, I really love that you don't quit, you know? And like making adjustments to like the way that I eat, now making adjustments to my gym routine, cutting sugar, trying to do different things. Like, no matter what, I'm never going to quit on myself,
Yeah, that's
right?
beautiful.
We're never going to quit on each other.
Yeah.
Like, no matter what this journey looks like, um, I'm navigating the haze by actively deciding that whatever it is that I try, I'm going to be trying. I'm not
Mhm.
going to go to some corner and pout and be defeated and say, okay, I'm through with it. No, I will release this tie that I have to success for my humanity and my life's journey being tied to these tangible outcomes,
Yeah.
right? And I don't know what that'll look like. It'll probably be an ongoing therapeutic journey for me, but I am determined to not quit on myself and to know that I have found success through everything else that we are birthing as well. And if a baby comes into that, it will be that they come into a healthy environment, one where we are walking in our healing and our wholeness. And we know that we are doing the best that we can every day and not wallowing in some sense of failure that we created, based on some unfair expectation that we've given ourselves or was imparted to us by somebody who hadn't done their healing work either.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes me think about the word practice, medical practice. When you go to the
Hmm.
doctor, people think they know everything and they just give you something to treat it, but it's really because they've tried different things, right?
Hmm.
Try this to see if this works. If it doesn't, then try something else. It is literally practice. You're testing different things to see which response gives you the results you're looking for, or which action gives you the response you're looking for. And it makes me feel like life is is one big ass practice.
Yeah, it
You know what I
is.
mean?
It
Just
really is.
trying shit. And that's, I guess, what it truly means to be on a journey.
Yeah.
It is not some end destination. It's like, peaks, valleys,
Hmm.
twists, turns, forks in the roads. I was going this direction. Actually, I hate it over here. I'm moving this
Hmm.
way. It's really interesting and humbling or sobering, to use your words, to be at this big age and really just be realizing that about life, you know?
Yeah,
Not that I ever feel like I have everything figured out, but it really does surprise me to keep waking up, to keep awakening to myself and to life as I age.
that is I don't know. That's real big. That's almost a mic drop moment for me, like to
Mm,
keep awakening to myself. Right.
mm,
It gives me perspective on dealing with like my family of origin, and even getting away from the fertility portion of it and thinking about how even in the intro we were talking about, like, we talk about navigating relationships, we talk about healing past traumas, we talk about teaching people how to love us, but when it comes to family,
mhm,
it always seems to be a little bit different, right? Because these are your people, these are the people
mhm,
that you are um almost married to,
mhm.
right? And you have a different type of connection to this relationship. And every day I'm awakening to myself, right? I'm finding out new things about me. I'm giving myself a new chance to get it right. And I have to understand, like, my family is doing that also.
Mhm,
For some of them, they are still awakening to themselves, but some of them have settled that this is who I am and I don't want to make any changes,
mhm,
right? But we have a chance, in particular with our family, to continue to try to move the needle and push the envelope and encourage them to sometimes show up different, or sometimes to just love them in the way that they need to be loved, and to try to have this ongoing practice of um, telling them how to love us better and all of those things. And that is pushing past some family traumas for me, pushing past some stuck places, pushing past some stuff that, even my dad said was important to him,
mhm,
and finding out what's important to me, right?
mhm,
Deciding, choosing my people every day,
mhm.
deciding that I want to love them anyway, and that our arguments and our disagreements are really about, like, how can I love you better?
Yeah.
And how can we show up for each other in a way that is beneficial for everybody in this relationship,
Mhm.
and not deciding that I don't want to deal with you no more.
Yeah.
You know, that's a difficult part of it.
It really makes also brings to mind, I really agree with that. The for the Black community specifically, I'm thinking about all versions of family. I'm thinking about enslaved people creating families and being ripped apart, never to see them again.
Yeah,
And so, what part of our beliefs about family is racial trauma? And what part of our beliefs about family are those genetic things that we don't even feel? Like, a man, a slave enslaved man who had a family ripped apart, sold somewhere else, did he procreate? Was he bred, how do you say it,
hmm,
to create family elsewhere? And so then what did that do to the family that he started it to begin with versus the other family? And so our community is made up of so much of that, and we see evidence of that, other ways that the government has tried to break our families apart in terms of like the school to prison pipeline and so many of our men being there. So it really is a complicated construct to really try to break down in terms
and
of
figure out.
black the
Hmm,
black community.
hmm,
So us even trying to wrap our heads around what family means, yeah, I can understand why we would be like, well, I don't, you know, that's it's a lot. It's a lot.
yeah, yeah, and just because you have to reconcile all of it, right? Or try your best to,
Mm,
anyway. Like, and that's why I say there's layers to it, right? There's like all of my stuck places, all of my own personal traumas, my
mhm,
own value systems that have come as a result of that.
mhm,
Always said, because my dad had these children that weren't legitimized, like, my children will know who I am, right?
mhm.
There will never be a situation if I have children, even if I'm not married to the mother, where I won't be active in their lives. And then for that not to be my current circumstance, it's almost like I have this desire to um, break this generational cycle that I've not been able to do that is my own stuff, right? And I don't know. It's just all these different layers
It
to it, and
is.
then having to be forced to even redefine what. Looking at the possibility of having to redefine what family will look like for me, what family of origin will look like for me,
Mhm.
what chosen family will look like for me. Like
Mhm.
actively doing all of that. And I think I see in a lot of like my friendships from college and the friendships that we have now, people that we're close to are not necessarily bloodline kin, right? But they are our family of choice. And having to deal with the fact that family of choice may be expanded now into
Mhm.
like little people that we raise.
Mm.
That is, I've been able to compartmentalize, right? And it's made so much sense. Like this my mama people, my daddy people, these my college friends who my family, right? So my kids come along, yes, that's your Uncle Chris, right?
Mhm.
That's your Uncle Scott, that's your Uncle Stud, right? Those are your chosen family, and my kids will like have this mass confusion in that way, and I've been okay with that. But now to have to expand my own mind outside
Mhm.
of that compartmentalization that I had defined for myself what it was gonna look like. I was gonna actively confuse my kids because all my college friends are your uncles and your aunties,
Yeah.
right? And now having to expand that beyond like this may not be a bloodline thing. This may be like family that we choose to raise,
Mhm.
whatever that looks like. Beautiful brown babies
Happy,
that are
healthy,
ours.
whole, beautiful brown babies. Yeah, same here. I'm thinking about the generational cycles that I had myself. One of the questions I had that we didn't get to, but it kind of come up organically now is like, has your idea of family changed since you've become an adult? And for so long, for me, the goal was to break the generational cycle of having babies out of wedlock. And from a young mind, it was just that. And that's it. That
Hmm.
meant that I'm going to get married and I'm going to have a baby after I'm married. But then as I got older, I started to actually unlearn some things. And I was like, well, actually, I don't think there's anything wrong with somebody having a baby and not being married. Like, if somebody
Hmm.
wants to have a baby, a child is a gift. At some point in my 20s, I started to feel like if if somebody actually wants to have a baby and that's their choice, they chose it and they're
Hmm.
not married, I think actually that's okay,
Hmm.
regardless of what I've been taught to believe. And now it's like, and then the generational cycle thing became, I want to break the cycle of not having a choice, right? So maybe in my family, they had babies because they felt like they had to or whatever. And now I'm like, well, gosh, even just saying that that's a cycle that needs to be broken, I'm thinking about all the shame that was wrapped up in
Hmm.
how these children came along and
Hmm.
that how that shame I'm sure is like some sort of genetic trauma that I want to break. And so there's so many layers
Hmm.
to it. Like even the self-imposed expectation that I put like it's your responsibility to break this specific type of
Yes.
cycle in this
Hmm.
way, like, but why though? And it's somehow if we don't have kids in that way, that I've failed that cycle. When really I've been trying to tell myself like how I am, who I am now as I exist today. I've already broken cycles. I've
Yeah.
already broken chains, and so I need to learn to have that be enough, and that whatever I do moving forward is just bonus. So
Yeah.
it's so much
Yeah.
to really wade through there.
And also, I think this thing that I've tasked myself with of being a disruptor,
Hmm.
right? I want to disrupt so much. I'm gonna disrupt that. That stuff been happening in our family for so long. I'll be talking about my family like, these Negroes love to keep secrets. They love to do this. They love to do that. I'm getting ready to disrupt that cycle. And I'm gonna disrupt it in this way. And I'm not gonna do this, not gonna be a part of that. And da 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 da. And then I get ready to try to disrupt this thing. And it ain't as easy as
Yeah.
I thought. Like even the idea, like I took for granted that like being able to like have kids was just a given. And then I
Mm.
was gonna disrupt this other part of it on the other side of when I have my babies, but we are here and like, babies ain't happening.
Mhm.
Right. So when do I get to the part where I disrupt? Right. And then you realize that a part of your journey is like disrupting expectation.
And learnings and yeah,
Hmm.
that's real. And then it also makes me be like, but why us? Why do we have to be the ones to have to
What we say last episode, get somebody else to do it. I don't want to do that.
you know? Oh Lord, this is helpful for me today. I don't even know where we are in a conversation, but it doesn't even matter at this point. I think I would
Hmm.
ask. I don't know that we said already that we don't know how to navigate it. You just keep moving and
Hmm.
you just keep trying, and that's gonna have to be enough today because it's enough
That's what
for
I got.
yeah, we got. And then anything that we've learned.
For me, I think the biggest learning for me is that it is something that's ongoing,
Mm-hmm.
um, and that there is just love,
Mm.
um,
Yeah.
for our people, for ourselves, um, for the journey ahead,
Mm-hmm.
for the current experience, that I am tasked with finding my emotional maturity and my
Mm-hmm.
spiritual maturity
Mm-hmm.
in the midst of, that I am tasked with navigating this journey as someone who is in therapy, who is more emotionally and spiritually mature than a child who would just throw a fit when he doesn't get his way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and having to learn those
Mm.
lessons as we go through and navigate no's and pivots and figuring out what our next steps are. I'm not able to take this time to like wallow, and not able to take this time and say, well, that's unfair. And so
Mm-hmm.
I'm never doing anything for God again because he won't do
Mm-hmm.
this thing for me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it is my own personal journey towards disrupting emotional and spiritual immaturity in my own life
Mm-hmm.
and not for other people. And basically, what I feel like my calling is in this season is to grow up,
Mm.
um,
Mm. That's a word.
and be able to define for my own self what family is going to look like, release myself from some of these things that were my father's values,
Mm-hmm.
that were other people's values, that don't belong to me, that is not
Mm-hmm.
supposed to be a part of my story,
Mm-hmm.
and to figure out what my work is and what my story is supposed to be, and to get about doing that work rather than spending my time in therapy like beating myself up for not being able to live out my father's values when he's no longer here.
Mm-hmm. Especially when he might not have been able to live out his values
He couldn't
himself.
do it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But I would also say that to add to that, in some way you already have done what he asked you to do because we have us and we have the love haze. And
Mhm.
regardless of where it goes and how many episodes we do and how many like what programs we have, like the love haze stemmed from, an idea that
Mhm.
Scott Hayes had. And so now
Mhm.
that is legacy. So I mean, hopefully that you sit with that and
Yeah.
maybe you can say that you check that box off, and now you can go on to figuring out how you believe, how you feel about it.
Yeah.
And what's next? We're talking about music.
We might as well.
So the music for the moment, Jill Scott, Family Reunion.
Mhm.
Whoa. Dang, what can you say? It's family.
That's family.
Just all kinds of rigmarole in the song and people fighting and potato salad is green and aunties dancing to Frankie Beverly. It's
Mhm.
like
People getting called out.
it's just people.
Yeah.
it's just what can you say? And so that's what this feels like. It's family, and I think the continuing work that we'll do is to just figure out what that is for us.
Yeah.
But, well, we thank y'all for tuning in to this episode and to every episode. We invite you to like, follow, and subscribe and rate us. Yeah. Take the journey with us. Join the conversation. Leave us some comments. Let us know what you think about different topics or topics that you'd love us to unpack together. If you want to join the conversation with us, hit us up. Let us know.
Chill.
We are everywhere. We're all over the internet. So iHeart Radio and Spotify and Apple and all the places. Although
Hmm.
most of our listeners come from Apple and Spotify, we thank you all for listening wherever you are. We have quite a number of viewers on YouTube as well. So we appreciate y'all for taking the journey with us. Like we always say, life will always just keep living, y'all. Present you with a haze.
Oh, you officially your old lady season. Tell the folks just keep living.
But we got everything that we need within us to navigate through it.
That's right. And we appreciate y'all for joining us, man. Continue to rock with us. We're going to take the journey together. We appreciate y'all. Holla.